All right, good afternoon. I'm going to call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Emergency Management Committee. Today is June 8th, 2016. It is 2:30 p.m. or 2:32 p.m. And I just want to note that we scheduled our meeting an hour later just because there were some issues related to council members having prior obligations, and we would not have had quorum if we would have started at 1:30. And so that's why the lateness in terms of, or us rescheduling to 2:30. So with that said, with me today are council members Reich, Quincy, and Council President Johnson, and I believe Councilmember Gordon will be joining us shortly. Today we have 6 items on our agenda. 5 of them are consent items, and 1 of them is a public hearing. And I will try to dispose of the consent items first. So the items are, item number 2 is a contract amendment with Hennepin Health Services for provision of an attending medical director. Second item is the contract with Minneapolis Public Housing Authority for investigating fraud under Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program. Third item is the contract with SMG for perimeter security at U.S. Bank Stadium. The fourth item is the contract amendment with Minneapolis Public Schools for SROs. And the sixth item is the Contract Compliance Division 2016 first quarter report. And council members, anybody want to pull anything for discussion? Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple questions. I'm just curious about this contract with the MPHA for investigating fraud. Is that a new initiative, or is this our typical contract with them for?
Ms. McPherson, if you can address that.
Mr. Chair, Council President Johnson, it is a new initiative. It's a very short-term contract. Really, they are having some issues, and they wanted us to investigate what those are.
Okay, great. Thank you. So this is different from our contract with them for the police officers?
Yes,
okay.
and we still have that.
Yep, okay, thanks.
Okay. Council members, any other questions? Right, I want to recognize that Councilmember Gordon has joined us. All right, so with no further questions, I'd like to move all, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 5 consent items for approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. All right, our big item, or our public hearing item, is police body camera update. And this is an update on the body camera policy. And we've had the police come in to committee before to give us an update on where they're at this point. We're as close as we can be to the final draft of the policy. And so with that, the police department is here, and we'll have a presentation before we start the public hearing. So I'm Deputy Chief Arredondo, you're up. And Deputy Chief, let me just also point out for the record that this policy that was given to us just this morning. I'm guessing a little bit after 10 o'clock, and so some of us might not have had the chance to review it, but hopefully my colleagues can review it as we go, and do what we can to have some questions. But thank you, DC Arredondo.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Yang. Thank you. Council members. Before you, and I know that Chair Yang just mentioned you received just recently the latest draft policy for our body-worn cameras. And I'd like to take an opportunity to talk about some of the changes that have been amended or placed in there since the last draft version. And then, of course, trying to answer any questions that our committee members may have. So in doing so, I'd like to just talk about a couple of things that from our listening sessions that the Minneapolis Police Department, along with our NCR members, conducted several community listening sessions and bringing to light some of the things that the community members had wanted to see in the draft policy, and kind of where we're at and some of the things that have currently evolved since that time. So, and as we all are probably aware that the state legislature recently passed a bill as it relates specifically to body-worn cameras for the state here, so that'll be incorporated into some of this as well. One of the main key points that our community members talked about during those community listening sessions were consent. And while our current draft policy does not require officers to gain consent, it is noted in this current draft policies that officers should make an effort to notify a victim or witness of the use of the body-worn cameras, and attempts should be made to gain consent to record their statements. The other key piece that community members from those listening sessions talked about was the activation all time, or having those body-worn cameras activated all time. While it is not currently required in our current draft policy, there are at least 14 circumstances in which those body-worn cameras would be activated. Obviously, the vast majority of those interactions with our community members. We also, on page 3 of the draft policy, it highlights that officers are encouraged to inform members of the public that they are being recorded as well. Another key point from the community listening sessions was the matter of should officers be allowed to view the video prior to making their police reports. While our current draft policy does not require that, because to ensure the accuracy of the reports, we want to make sure that officers still have the opportunity to view video prior to making the report. And as also noted in the bill that was just recently passed and signed by the governor, it also allows for peace officers to review footage prior to making the report. With that, though, in any critical incident, video and/or audio data shall not be accessed unless approved by the assigned investigating agency. So that is something that is stipulated in this draft policy, which was, I don't believe was in the previous draft policy. In those listening sessions, community members spoke strongly about making sure that the draft policy detailed when video might be altered, and as listed in our draft, this current version of the draft policy under page 9, it states any necessary and lawful redaction or other editing shall only be completed by authorized personnel in the course of their lawful job duties. And it should be important to note that the original recordings shall remain intact and stored within the authorized storage system. And our members of the BTU, our Business Technology Unit, Records Information Unit, and Crime Lab folks, if in fact the chief or her designee stipulated so, they would have access to being able to do that. However, it should be noted once again that there will always remain the original recording intact, even if a separate auditing or redacting function is done. So just so the community members are fully aware of that no matter what happens after a subsequent original recording is done, whether it's shortened, lengthened, or what have you, that original recording will always remain intact. I think this was very important, and it was obviously echoed by the community during those listening sessions, was the about accountability. And it was talked about of making sure, because the original draft version did not have accountability as part of the focal point of the purpose. And as you can note from the draft version you have, the 6th word in the first sentence mentions accountability, and that the purpose of this, with the goal of enhancing accountability and public trust, this policy will provide MPD personnel with procedures for the use, management, access, retention, and handling of evidence storage and retrieval of recorded media. Also, the first bullet points also talks about the importance of accountability. That was something that was echoed throughout those community listening sessions, and to be very intentional, that's provided on the first page of the policy. They also, community members also mentioned about having a regular auditing of the officer's use of the camera, preferably by a third party. The new draft states that the body-worn cameras shall be independently audited in accordance with existing law. Community members also wanted the policy to note disciplinary actions will result if inappropriate use of those cameras were found to be. The new draft policy on page 1 at the bottom section there clearly notes that officers failing to adhere to this policy or applicable laws regarding the use of body-worn cameras and any associated data, including but not limited to restrictions regarding accessing such data, are subject to discipline up to and including termination. There was also mentioning about the policy should strike the language regarding cameras can't be used for surveillance of officers. Under page 3, under restrictions, that has been removed. Another point brought up during those community sessions that the MPD had heard from community members was the trying to address the issues of privacy and who can access video. And the issue of who can access the video will be in accordance, obviously, with the Minnesota Government Data Practices Act and other applicable laws. And state law mandates that only persons in the video can have access to those videos. If multiple people appear in those videos, the video must be redacted so that they cannot be identified in the video. Also to note, if an officer discharges their weapon or force that results in substantial bodily harm occurs, that video by state law is deemed public. One last point before, if our council members have questions. One of the conversations that occurred during the past several months was while officers are going to be equipped in the Minneapolis Police Department with these body-worn cameras and video and recording citizen contacts, there was a discussion why the Minneapolis Police Department currently did not have a specific policy on the citizens' rights, First Amendment rights to record officers. Since that time, our policy 9-202 highlights the police recording of public recording of police activities. Once again, being very intentional to note that the purpose of this policy is to acknowledge and protect the constitutional and legal rights of citizens to photograph and make audio and video recordings of Minneapolis Police Department personnel. The Minneapolis Police Department recognizes that members of the general public have an unambiguous First Amendment right to record police officers while they are conducting official business or while acting in the official capacity in any public space, unless such recordings interfere with police activity. Our Minneapolis police officers should assume that a member of the public is likely to be observing and possibly recording their activities at all times. Further in the policy, we note that officers shall not tell people that recording police activity is not allowed, requires a permit, or requires an officer's consent. And also to note in that policy, employees shall not erase or delete or request any person to erase or delete any files, media, or recorded images or sounds from any camera or other recording device that is in the possession of any person or that has been seized or voluntarily turned over. Such action may constitute a violation of the First, Fourth, and 14th Amendments. So I know that the community members had stressed about us having a policy that talks about their rights to record our activities, and so that policy is now.
Can we get that linked?
I'm sorry?
Can we get
Sure.
that linked to this item on our public safety agenda just so that the public can access that?
Chair Yang, yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right, Councilmember Quincy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, I was wondering if you could kind of explain to me, I'm kind of seeing the body cameras, forgive the analogy, just as like an episode of a TV show, and it's like one camera. What occurred to me is on the deactivation issue, that's an individual police officers. What happens when there's multiple officers wearing cameras at an incident? Is there any decision on this incident is over, we no longer need cameras, and how are we storing and identifying what's the incident camera that's being watched or can be viewed, or when multiple people are collecting information? Are we storing all versions of that incident?
Chair Yang, Councilmember Quincy. So to your question, yes, there are going to be incidents where multiple officers are perhaps recording the same incident or scene. All of those individual cameras, they're tracked So we can, if we need a particular officer's camera, we can certainly get that footage, get that video. To note also, officers cannot access the other officer's body-worn camera footage, so they cannot do that. But as a typical scene, as we would do now, let's say, for example, with our MVR, our mobile video recorders in our squad cars, our dash cams, if there are 6 or 7 squads that we see out at a scene, and all of those squads have what we believe may be evidentiary information or evidence through those videos, we can track and record and make sure that we get all of that video at the scene. So we have ways of being able to track that. Any access, by the way, also of any of the body-worn cameras, they're time-stamped, they're so we can certainly identify which body-worn camera to which employee at which scene. We have the capability of doing that.
Mm-hmm. And so to the question about the deactivation, the sequence of it, how do we know when to turn off all cameras or the incident is completed? Is it intuitive, or does it require some decision-making by some individual?
Chair Yang, Councilmember Quincy, based upon the circumstances, it will vary. The draft policy indicates that when officers believe that the situation for the most part is over with, or there's no need to capture any more of that, they have the discretion to deactivate those cameras. There's also provisions in there that require that if the officer deactivates the camera but believes perhaps it was a situation where they should have actually had it on, they must document that either through their police report, or if they don't have, if they're, if they didn't document the police report, then they have to do it via our CAD system or mobile digital computer system.
Councilmember Gordon.
Well, I have a couple questions, and I'm trying to review the draft and catch up on things here a little bit too. I'm wondering about when, in some circumstances, will officers be required to notify subjects that they could remain anonymous and they can stop choosing if they, if they stop recording if they choose that option?
Chair Yang, Councilmember Quincy. Yes, if the officer is in a situation, Councilmember Gordon, if the officer is in a situation where, based under the parameters listed out when activation should occur, if it doesn't meet one of those criteria, and the officer believes, well, let's say they're talking to a victim of a sexual assault or something where having that camera deactivated would help increase the trust and the person feeling willing to share information, then they can certainly, I'd like to turn the camera off. Would you like me to turn the camera off? Would that make you feel more comfortable in communicating with me? They certainly have the option of doing that.
Good, because it also, and I think part of that was there might be situations where the officer would prefer to keep it going, but the subject would have the option to say, turn it off. So hopefully they will also say, I think I'd like to record this, but I don't have to record it according to the policy, so we could have this turned off. And you're saying that's in this new policy.
Chair Yang, Councilmember Gordon, yes, so there's provisions laid out when the activation is required. However, if there are times when, and by the way, the community member can always express to the officer, if possible, they'd rather not be recorded. And once again, if the officer feels that it's a situation that it does not deem to be activated, they certainly have the discretion to deactivate the camera.
Yes, and there's a very specific list of when it should be activated, and the officer will say, I'm required to keep recording. Certainly we don't want every subject to say, turn it off. I'm going to do something really horrible right now, and I don't want you taping or something like that.
Yes.
So then I also was trying to find the place in here where it said that people who are the subject of the footage could request to review it. And I know we refer to the Records Information Bureau. I know I lost my place, but does it say explicitly in here that the subject of can review the footage?
Yes. Chair Yang, Councilmember Gordon. So yes, the person who is the subject of the video can, through our record system, request that footage. However, once again, stipulates that if there are any other individuals who are captured in that video recording, then it has to go through the process of those individuals' images being redacted or blurred.
And does it say that in the policy, or do we just say that by referring to the Government Data Practices Act and other applicable law?
Chair Yang, Councilmember Gordon, I believe that does. I'm just going to go through my notes here.
Because I couldn't actually find it in here. And then I kind of had a more nuanced question about that. For example, if the subject is deceased, and whether because of the interaction or during that or afterwards or something, does a family member or relative get to review the footage? Or if the subject is a minor or otherwise isn't their own guardian, I'm just wondering if there's a provision. And that might also be in the state law and having to do with Data Practices Act and who can get that kind of information. I'm not sure, but it wasn't mentioned in here. And I know that did come up. There was, I think, even ideas that relatives could review the footage. That would be, could be something we might allow, but I understand that we might not. Did you find it in the policy?
So Chair Yang, Councilmember Gordon, so I was still looking for that. Related to your question about if an individual is deceased, full disclosure, I'm not an attorney, and so I don't, that question is the first that I've heard of that, so.
Okay. And it looks like all we're doing in the bottom of page 8 is we're just saying they'll be considered in accordance with the Minnesota Government Data Practices Act. So that's going to be an extra step for everybody to find out if, you can really request the footage and see it. So that I'm not sure if it should be explicitly in the policy, but it might just help clear up and have it all in one document.
And Chair Yang, Councilmember Gordon, that is a great point to bring up. I do know that from the state law that those individuals who are captured on the video certainly have that right to make the request to get that. Others in the video would have to redact those. But as far as a draft policy, I'll take a further look into that.
And Mr. Can I ask the city
Sure,
attorney,
please.
do you have any idea if you're the subject of the information is deceased, if anybody else has a right to request it, like a family member?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and Councilmember Gordon, that would very much be an analysis done under the Data Practices Act. A lot of times we come across requests for data where the person, even if not deceased, is not the subject of the data. It's a family member, and you have to do the same analysis no matter who it is. If it's not the subject of the data, you have to look to the act to see who gets access to the data or not.
Okay, and then,
Ms. Siegel, I saw your hand up, so please come on up.
sorry.
Chair Yang and Councilmember Gordon, the newly enacted provision in the Data Practices Act that relates to body cameras, it allows just the subject of the data to get access to it. And as Chief Arredondo already said, if there are other people visible in it who have not consented to the release, then their images, will be blurred. If it's a minor, I'm not sure of the legal answer whether the legal guardian for that minor would have the right to access it. I've never researched that topic, so I know that there's an answer someplace probably in the opinions or in what we've done previously, and we can find out and let you know if legally if the individual is a minor.
Well, thank you. I just know that in some of the discussions, it was the subjects themselves or their relatives should have access to the footage. Then I had one last.
Councilmember Gordon, could I jump in real quick just with regards to your question there? So Deputy Chief Arredondo, kind of towards what Councilmember Gordon was asking, within the policy, I see, it reads public request for BWC recording shall be referred to records unit. And, that's one part of it, general public. But I mean, for the subject, is there a different track for them? There's a faster track for them, I imagine, in terms of accessing data, right?
Chair Yang, just to be clear, you're saying, so yes, from our policy, page 8, you're referring to, if the subject of that data wishes to seek a copy of the video or for them to go to a records unit, is there a faster track for them? As it is currently set up now through our systems, that is where all requests would go through. And so we haven't really launched this yet. So in terms of volume and
Right.
case law, so I don't, it would be through the same system, Records Information Unit, as far as faster track.
I'm thinking that would make sense, especially, if you're the subject matter of a video camera footage. I mean, it just seems like, if you're put on the same track as, let's say, a reporter or, just a general public citizen, I mean, it could take months and months sometimes. And, I mean, especially if the case is directly affecting you, I mean, wouldn't it make sense for you to, get access quicker? I mean, to maybe defend yourself or to, get yourself in a better situation?
Chair Yang, to your question, so with all of our requests that our community members have regarding wanting to receive, whether they're police reports, accident reports, which all go through our Records Information Unit, clearly, part of building up that trust is making sure that our community members feel that they're getting things in a timely manner. Because this is going to be a new vehicle in terms of what we see and the requests and the volume, we're going to be working closely with our RIU unit to just monitor that. Because if we should see that we begin to get inundated and time becomes an issue that also presses upon community members feeling that they're not getting the service they need or there's a lack of trust, then we certainly want to address that. And we will be monitoring that, particularly in terms of as we roll this out, what are the volume requests for these recordings. So.
Right. But I mean, my point is, if I'm the subject of, body cam footage and, I'm getting in line just like everybody else. And, for somebody who's not a subject and who is making a general request, I mean, if it takes them, let's say 2 months, it shouldn't take me 2 months, especially when, I got to put up my defense, maybe if I have to do all these different things, if it's going to take me 2 months too. I mean, I don't know if that makes any sense.
Chair Yang, it certainly makes sense. We certainly want to keep a consistent process in place in terms of integrity, making sure that every community member goes through the same route. It's also good for us in terms of being able to track that through our Records Information Unit. Quite frankly, we'll have to have those conversations with our RIU staff to see if that means if we start seeing an inundation and a large volume, issue about staffing and how we triage and manage those types of things. But as far as right now, through our draft policy and through our current system, those requests would go through the same system of our RAU, Records Information Unit.
Okay. Councilmember Gordon, I'm sorry, I cut in.
That's
Go
all
ahead.
right. No, that's fine. I kind of agree, and I wonder if there isn't a faster track to get a police report or to get some dash cam footage if you're actually charged with a crime or somehow you're getting put into the system. There must be a way that people can access that information a little more quickly, but maybe there isn't. But it would seem that would be a fair way to do it, although somebody might want to see the footage right away anyway.
Chair Yang and Councilmember Gordon, if there is a criminal case, prosecutors are obligated to provide discovery. If discovery is requested, we're obligated to provide any exculpatory evidence. And with this system, actually, I think it's just going to be a matter of sending a link, and downloading it. So that that's prescribed by the rules of criminal procedure for timely response to that.
So in those cases, it would be rapid. There might be other cases where you'd say, I think that something went wrong with my interaction with the police. I'd like to review the footage somehow. And we still may have to wait. So I guess I'm sympathetic to what you were saying. And I just wanted to say it would make sense if somebody's a subject of it that they might be able to review it sooner. The last piece that I just wanted to be clear about had to do with reviewing the footage of an incident before writing a report. And I know that came up a lot in discussions. I know it came up early in our discussions, and I was looking at what's our dash cam policy, thinking that would be consistent. And so it seemed like reviewing the footage made sense. But I understand it was left out of the state law. I think the governor made some comment about that and didn't want it in there. And it also came up over and over again at the community meetings. But I noticed that it's still in our policy is that we want the officers to be able to review their camera footage before even writing their initial report. Is that true?
Chair Yang, Councilmember Gordon, yes. So we still believe that the officers being allowed to view their body-worn camera footage prior to making a report really helps in terms of ensuring the accuracy of those reports, and that's why it has remained within our draft policy.
And it probably does improve the accuracy. I think the concerns that we heard from people is that the arrest should have been made on the information that they had at the time, and they should have had their probable cause without reviewing any of that footage, and there was somehow concern that the report would change. So I think there was some interest in having an initial report drafted without reviewing the body camera footage. And so I'm just reiterating what we've already talked about and we've already heard. I personally was kind of on the fence on this, but then I saw that it might really help address community issues of trust. And certainly the footage could be reviewed later as people are looking at the case as it moves up and down the line. But so I just wanted to highlight that that change hadn't been made, and that's one of the things that the community talked about, and we haven't changed the policy at this point. Thank you.
Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess my question goes to, are the rules different then for body cam footage than our existing capacity, like our dash cams, that kind of thing? Are they different then? What about dash cam video? Is it only available to the subject of the video and that sort of restriction?
Chair Yang, Council President Johnson. So there are certain things that are similar in terms of the body cam to the dash cam. We certainly have our retention periods, but this is it's a little bit different, as I say, just because, for example, some of the policy differences is, example, officers would not now longer be required to wear the MVR microphone because they will be attached with a body-worn camera. And so there are some differences in that in terms of the technology and what's addressed in the policy.
Okay, thanks.
Chair Yang, if I could, to Councilmember Gordon's, I know that you had mentioned regarding the officers being able to review the reports prior to, being able to watch the video prior to making the reports. I just want to highlight that it's very important to, during critical incidents, that would not be the case. So if it's a critical incident, officers would not be reviewing video. And as the draft policy indicates in here, during a critical incident, the investigative agency or those investigative agents who are handling that critical incident, those are the individuals that would only be allowed to grant access. And so under critical incidents, no, the officers would not be allowed to view video prior to making their reports.
Well, I see that now under the critical incident section, and so I think that's a change, and it's important that we highlight that. In fact, that might address a lot of the concerns people had. Thank you.
But Deputy Chief Redondo, I mean, did you not mention earlier that some critical incidents involving discharge of weapon or something like that becomes public information or becomes public? And so how do those two things go together?
Chair Yang, so there, once again, circumstances could vary. There might be a situation where it's an accidental discharge of a firearm. But under this provision, officer involved in a shooting or a discharge of weapon, his or her weapon, as well as just discharge of the weapon and a use of force that results in substantial bodily harm. In those circumstances, officers would not be, under a critical incident, would not be viewing the video prior to making the report, but also under those circumstances, those videos would be deemed public.
Okay.
So discharge weapon and any use of force by an officer that results in substantial bodily harm, those videos would be deemed public.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand that. Okay, so officers would not be able to review that, but the information is public, so everybody can review that, including officers. Is that, or I'm missing something, I feel like.
So, Chair Yang, under the provision, under critical incident, currently the officers under this here would not be allowed to view the video prior to making the report.
Okay.
However, if that critical incident involves one, or if the incident involves an officer discharging their weapon, aside from the, not speaking so much critical incident, discharge of weapon or use of force that results in substantial bodily harm, those videos are deemed public. Now, there are going to be exceptions, perhaps, if that matter is under criminal investigation review or what have you. So there are going to be some differences in that. But as it currently stands, discharge of a weapon, or any use of force that results in substantial bodily harm, those videos would be deemed public.
Right. Council President Johnson, do you have any more questions? Okay. All right. Well, if we can save some questions for after the public hearing, that would be great. And we're going to go straight to the public hearing now. And so we're going to begin this public hearing, and the process will proceed as follows. Any member of the public who wants to speak, if you can sign up with the clerk, that would be very helpful for us. We will begin with the list, and if the clerk can just give me the list. Oh, we don't have anybody signed up right now. Okay, well, this might be quick. And we're going to open up the public hearing. We're going to allow people to speak for 3 minutes. I just want to note that 3 minutes is fairly long for public hearings, and so I'm going to cut you off at 3 minutes, okay? And that's pretty much it. Anybody wanting to submit written comments, please feel free to do so. You can submit the public comments to the clerk or to myself, and I will get it to all the members here. And that is about it. After the public hearing is closed, council members, we will open it up for a discussion and or comments afterwards. And then I just want to note that we are not voting on whether to approve this policy or not. We are taking public comments, and then we will receive and file these at the end. And that's the extent of what we're doing as a committee, just to be clear. And so does anybody have any questions about this? All right, well, we are going to open up the public hearing, and anybody who has signed up or would like to speak, please come on up. Please state your name, your address for the record, and please come on up.
Chair Yang, council members, my name is Jim Michaels. I'm attorney for the Police Federation. We welcome the opportunity to address you on this issue today. The first thing I would like everybody to know is that going all the way back to squad video cameras back in the mid-2000s, I want to say about maybe 2004, 2005, the Police Federation has taken the conscious step to collaborate and cooperate with the police administration rather than fight the issue. And we have a long-standing history of working together to try and come up with policies that serve all interests, including the public and police officers and the administration. Body cameras has been no different. We helped facilitate the pilot program. We worked with the city attorney's office in lobbying and addressing the legislature both last year and this year on what wound up in the body camera legislation that was signed by the governor. The one thing that I just wanted to point out to you today is, like you, we didn't get this draft until this morning as well. But the one thing that we maybe have an issue that we need to have further conversations with the police administration about is the issue of the body camera as surveillance. I know that that was one of the topics that you heard from community members on. But I think it was important in the pilot program, and we believe it's important to maintain that in the ongoing policy, that the body cameras may be reviewed periodically on a random basis for compliance with the policy. But we do have an objection if the intent is to try and target individual officers to spot check or to pour through, I want to see Officer Jones' body camera video for the last 2 months because I want to see what he's up to. We don't think that that's appropriate, and in fact, one of the reasons why in the pilot program policy we referred to the language prohibiting the surveillance on officers is because there's case law from many other jurisdictions throughout the country that when the body camera system is used for purposes of surveilling officers, it becomes a term and condition of employment that has to be negotiated. And we have not taken that position on any of the technology pieces that we have worked on for the last several years, and we don't really want to do it with this either. And so I think perhaps in the discussions we have had on this issue with the police administration, we can find maybe a happy medium to assure that the interests of the public in policy compliance are satisfied without necessarily allowing the absence of that language to facilitate a winch hunt on individual officers. So that's the concern. We just wanted to bring that forward to you. I'll be happy to answer any questions in the minute 26:54 that I have left. Otherwise, thank you for the time.
Thank you. And it wasn't that you finished early. It was that we were messing around with this thing. It wasn't working very well, but you hit your 3-minute mark perfectly, though.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Michaels. Anyone else who would like to speak on this issue? Anyone else? All right. Wow. All right. Seeing none, I will close this public hearing. All right. Thank you. All right. Deputy Chief Arredondo, I have a few questions. And so this is not to try to embarrass the police department, but more so just wanted to ask in terms of logistics, why did it take this long to get this policy in this morning?
Chair Yang, council members, this has been a very, as far as you receiving it just today, we have literally been working on it, and it's a very weighty and important document. I mean, we've certainly heard from community. This is something that our entire police department is going to be utilizing. Many in the community have expressed that this is a tool that could potentially help build the trust. So we know that we're not seeking perfection in this policy, but we certainly are trying to seek something that will establish goodwill and help us with the accountability and trust that we were so intentional in mentioning in the first and listing in the first page of this. So this is something, not that any policy should ever be expedited or rushed, but this is certainly something that we wanted to make sure we're taking our time. And to that point, this is still a draft. I mean, we still, if there are things that continue to come up, or if there are things or issues that we still need to look at, now that the legislature has passed their bill, we still want to confer and make sure that we get this as right as possibly as we can. So in terms of the delay in our council persons getting this morning, our apologies in that, but I want to assure you that it was something that was not sitting on a shelf for the last 3 months. It has been a living, working document, and quite frankly will continue to be. And even after we establish a policy to roll out, I can almost guarantee you we will continue to come back to this as communities' needs change, as technology changes, as when we hear from our officers what's working out there in terms of the equipment, all of those things, this will continue to be a living, breathing document. So.
And, with regards to officers having to remove themselves from service because their battery is out or something like that, I'm just wondering, are we purchasing spare, body-worn cameras as well, or, spare battery packs or something like that, just so that they won't be out of service for very long if and when their battery runs out?
Chair Yang, my understanding is yes, our part of the purchasing will be to equip with our folks will be managing the equipment needs. We'll have some spares, but part of also built into the draft policy about officers making sure that they do these regular check-ins in terms of the equipment, malfunctioning, damage at the beginning of their shifts and throughout the shift, just as to assure that if we do have a faulty device out there, that it's getting in serviced right away so that it's not taking up too much time for an officer being out of service.
Okay, and in the off chance that an officer is removed out of service, I mean, we don't anticipate that that's going to be like, let's say 2 hours or, so I mean, we're thinking like maybe hopefully half an hour, if at most, right?
Chair Yang, and so I think one thing to look at this, so, we're going to start off with the first precinct. We'll have the first rollout. But if we just fast forward and say that all 5 precincts have these cameras, every officer on the shift will have their own assigned camera. We'll make sure that we're monitoring that. Supervisors will also be monitoring that. If we see that there's issues in terms of the equipment itself that is causing a delay in it getting swapped out or what have you, we'll certainly be monitoring that and working with the vendors on that. Yeah.
Okay, and can you speak to what Mr. Michaels pointed out a little bit earlier, which is, I think, I mean, everyone will agree with this idea of auditing to improve our police departments, but in terms of, a witch hunt for, let's say, a problem officer that, we're going to go back, anywhere from 2 to 6 months looking at, any of their body camera footage just to see any mistakes that they've made for discipline. I mean, is that, something that is within the realm of possibilities, or, what is in our policy to prevent that from happening?
Chair Yang, so in fairness, I've not had the opportunity to have a discussion with Mr. Michaels, but the intent is really similar to other things that we already have in place now. For example, if there's opportunities for supervisors to look at these in terms of a training situation or a coaching situation, as you're well aware, we're going to be implementing an EIS system real soon. There's measures we have in place now with our internal affairs unit that looks at use of force reports and squad car video now. Many of those are to look at just to see if there's any training issues or policy issues that might have occurred. And they can range from everything from coaching to beyond that. But the intent is certainly not to, as our supervisors are looking for specific ways to, where there's violations or things to provide penalties against the officer. Really what this is for office supervisors to do just that, to supervise their people, to look at ways, if it's, like I said, if it's a training issue, coaching issue. This is, once again, this is going to be new technology for the police department. It's important that not only the officers, as they go through this and learn the nuances of this equipment, it's important for supervisors to assure that the officers, like every policy, that the officers are in accordance with those policies and procedures. And I also think that also helps establish and build the trust that we're trying to gain as well.
Okay. And, another question, kind of going back to earlier when reviewing video, and from the citizen's perspective, if you're the subject matter of, of footage in that situation and you're getting interrogated or questioned, let's say that night or the following night, I mean, in that situation, I mean, if you want the same privilege that an officer has in terms of reviewing video, I mean, can you make that request, and will that request be granted at that point, or, do those citizens have to just go through our normal processes?
Chair Yang, so yes, under the circumstance you described, that community member could certainly go through our records information unit to request that footage. Okay,
so if they're under interrogation at that point, if they make that request, I mean, you just basically say, you have to go through our regular channels, right?
As it stands now, yes, we want to maintain a consistent channel.
Okay. Councilmember Gordon.
I'm just curious about where the policy is going to be posted so people can find it and see it. I guess I'm hoping, especially if there's changes that come in the future, we'll be notified, but I also that it will be on the police department's web page and their site there, and it'll be easily accessible to everybody so they can check it now and into the future.
Chair and Councilmember Gordon, so yes, prior to the actual first precinct officers rolling out with the body cameras, policy obviously will have to be in place. Yes, we'll make sure that we get it posted online and through different media sources and outlets for folks. I should also mention too, I'll continue to work with NCR. We will plan to hit communities as well to educate them, make them aware, listen to them regarding with whatever the final policy will be as well.
And when will the final policy be approved, and when will the pilot start, or not the pilot, the rollout begin in the first precinct?
Chair Yang, Councilmember Gordon, the anticipated date, I want to say mid-July. There's training that each precinct officers will go through regarding the body camera. So I want to say that might be sometime mid-July. I'll get a confirmation date on that.
Okay. And prior to that, the final policy will be out and won't be called a draft anymore.
Chair Yang, Councilmember Gordon, that is correct.
Okay.
I would still note it's a living, breathing document and will be for.
Right, it can change, but it
yes.
will be the policy that they operate under starting in the middle of July. Okay, thank you very much.
I have one last question. I'm just wondering, with SWAT entries, let's say, there are 10 SWAT guys going into a house. I mean, are all the cameras on? I see I see a provision here that says, any tactical entry or forced entry into a building unless the supervisor has determined in advance that the video or audio data could result in the disclosure of operational or tactical information that would compromise the effectiveness of future actions or jeopardize officer safety. So let's say, if that exception is not there, there's 10 guys going into a house, do they all turn on their body cameras?
Chair Yang, if that, could you, I know that you mentioned about the tactical. Yeah, if the tactical supervisor believes that it's not going to interfere with the officer's safety or the operation, absolutely those officers.
So all 10 of them go in with their cameras on then?
If all of those folks wearing those cameras would have them activated then.
Okay. All right. Council members, any other questions? All right. Seeing none, I will just move to receive and file this action, and we'll kind of go from there. So any questions? Right. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Thank you. And with that, we are done with our businesses for this committee. And so, Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And nothing, Chief Arredondo. I just wanted to comment that there's a very compelling story in the Star Tribune today about a young girl who was shot in her bedroom in North Minneapolis, and the challenges that she's going through, and her mother's account of the trying to deal with what's going on outside her home, and escalation that comes with people playing dice games, that kind of thing is what she's talking about. And this young woman has got a injury to her foot that isn't healing well, according again to this article. And I really want to point out again, this is going on too much. A child has got an injury in her foot that may affect her for the rest of her life. We all walk on our feet. We know how important they are. This is just intolerable in our city. And I can't stress enough, people need to understand what is going on in this community, and that everything in our city should be focused on public safety, because that's the number one issue right now in this city, as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
And Council President Johnson, if I may add to that, as we are here now, the funeral for Burdell Beeks is happening up on the north side at New Salem Baptist Church, and Ms. Beeks was the grandmother who was in the minivan when some stray bullets were shot, and it hit her and killed her. And so I completely agree with you on that public safety should be our number one priority, especially given the number of shootings that are happening on the north side there. So yes, I agree with you. And let me close by just saying, I really appreciate the police department and all our staff who are not a part of the police department as well, in terms of engaging the public and allowing the public to comment on our body-worn camera policy, and doing everything we can to get to a place where we would have the best policy possible under the circumstances. Understand that it's a living, working document that could change over time, based on incidents or based on trial and error and those sorts of things. But just to have that sort of engagement that includes going out to the community, talking with different folks, engaging with the PCOC, doing all that sort of thing. I think it's a good example of how we should be engaging with everybody, just so that we come up with something that works for this great community that we have in Minneapolis. And so thank you to the police department and to everybody involved in terms of helping us get to this point. And I know that we were kind of dancing a little bit on eggshells with regards to this public safety committee involving itself in the policy making related to this body worn camera. But I feel like we did it well enough that we didn't step on anybody's toes, and we got to a good place. And hopefully we will get a really good policy when we start, and then we can slowly change it as we move on. But thank you so much, everybody. Okay, so with that, and with no further business before this committee, we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.